アサヒグループホールディングス、そしてアスクルも被害を。
ランサム攻撃っていうのはですね、重要なシステムであったり、サーバー、ファイルがアクセスできなくなる。ランサムウェアの攻撃者っていうのを聞くと、地下室で一人のフードをかぶってっていうのをやってるようなイメージをすると思うんですけども、一企業みたいな形でですね、人事部ですとか営業部ですとか経理部といったような売上をどれだけ上げられるかの身代金を支払っていただけるような会社さんを狙っていますので、日本の企業というのはかなり攻撃しがいのある市場である。
ワンオンワンテック始まります。今日のテーマは日本を襲うランサムウェアの脅威です。アサヒグループホールディングスやアスクルが被害を受けた大規模なサイバー攻撃は日本の産業界を震撼させました。そしてそもそもランサムウェア攻撃とは何なのか、攻撃を受けると何が起こるのか、身代金を支払うのか拒否するのかなどなど疑問は尽きません。クロスディグをご覧になっている皆さんの会社にもその脅威は迫っているんじゃないでしょうか。今日はサイバー攻撃の被害に遭った企業を支援するイスラエルのセキュリティ企業シグニアからお二人の専門家をお招きしました。まずはアジア太平洋日本担当副社長のラウロ・バーカートさん。Lauro, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having us.
そして日本拠点のクライアントリーダーシップマネージャー青木壮太さんです。よろしくお願いします。
お願いします。
まずこのシグニアという会社、聞き慣れない方も多いと思うんですけれども、何をやっているのかちょっとラウロさんに伺いたいと思うんですけれども。Could you tell us what Signia actually does? What kind of cybersecurity companies?
Yes, thank you so much. So we're a cybersecurity consulting company. We do support our clients in the case of an incident, a large-scale attack that comes from different type of attacks groups, and we kind of help them navigate through that crisis by looking at how to contain the threat, how to investigate what has happened, how to recover, how to monitor the environments in the right way. And also potentially how to negotiate with threat actors if it's a ransomware case.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how many cases is Signia dealing with?
So we do have roughly 1 to 2 cases a week, right? Globally, right?
Okay.
We operate globally across all main geographies and across 24/7 type of coverage. And the Asia Pacific region, we focused on Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and Southeast Asia.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
それで直近でですね、このアサヒグループホールディングスがまず9月にシステム障害になるような被害を受けたわけなんですけれども、その後いろんな影響が長引いています。出荷業務が停止したりとか、工場で生産も一時中断したりとかっていうことが続いています。そしてアスクルも被害を受けました。10月に攻撃が受けたということを公表して、いろんな個人情報の流出を確認したっていう話ですとか、出荷ができなくなったりとか、アスクルの物流サービスを利用している良品計画とか、ああいうとこいろんな影響が及んでいます。じゃあなぜ今これだけ日本で攻撃が増えているのか。これ青木さんに伺いたいんですけども。
日本企業もですね、やはり様々な情報ですとか、技術を持っておりますので、攻撃者にとってとても攻撃しがいのある企業さんだというふうに考えております。で、もともとはですね、日本企業もやっぱりその日本語といった言語のファイアウォール、壁みたいなのがあったわけなので、攻撃者もなかなか攻撃しても実際のそのリターンがあまりなかったっていうような状況ではあったんですけども、技術の進歩ですとか、AI の発展とかによってこの辺のハードルが一気に下がって、やはり日本への攻撃っていうのが増加しているふうに考えられます。
なるほど。わかりました。ありがとうございます。で、今日は3つの点でランサムウェア攻撃のことをいろいろ見ていければと思うんですけれども、最初はランサムウェア攻撃とは何か、What is ransomware? で、2つ目が攻撃者との交渉のリアル、The reality of negotiation with attackers. そして3つ目がサイバー攻撃は進化する、The evolution of cyber attacks. という3つの点で見ていきたいと思います。で、最初のパート、主に青木さんに伺っていければと思うんですけれども、ランサム攻撃とは何かということで、ちょっと最初にこのランサム攻撃ってズバリ何なんですか？
そうですね。ランサム攻撃っていうのはですね、いわゆるランサムウェアといったマルウェアのようなものをですね、何かしら方法で環境の中で実行させられまして、重要なシステムであったり、サーバー、ファイルがですね、暗号化され、アクセスできなくなるような攻撃です。で、実際にこのような暗号化をですね、解くための複合機を入手するためには、ランサム、身代金を支払うような要求を攻撃者がしてくるといった攻撃になっております。
なるほど。複合機、暗号を解く鍵ってことですね。
おっしゃる通りです。
なるほど。 で、ちょっとこう視聴者の方にもいろいろイメージしてもらいやすくするためにですね、いろんなインシデントにこのシグニアという会社対応しているということで、実際どんな攻撃があって、どんなインシデントにこう対応した、結構リアルな現場いろいろあるって伺ってるんですけど。
我々が様々なランサムウェア攻撃をですね、対応している中で、我々としても一番ダメージが大きかった例を挙げますと、とあるですね、鶏肉加工会社がですね、ランサムウェアに遭ってしまいまして、その会社がですね、その国の9割の鶏肉の加工、そして出荷を担当していた企業なんですけども。
海外の、
そうですね。で、実際ランサムウェアはですね、かけられた際に、IT のシステムはもちろんなんですけども、そこでERP といった、どこにその鶏肉を出荷しなければいけないのかといったデータが、保存されているシステムもやられてしまい、必然的に、工場の方もですね、止めなければいけないような状況になっておりましたと。で、これによってですね、鶏肉の出荷が止まってしまい、またさらに9割の鶏肉が国に出せないことになってしまったので、かなり国に対しても大きな問題を、及んでいまして、実際に48時間以内に復旧ができないと、実際にそのクライアントが大統領に直で電話をかけ、復旧ができないので、貯蓄米じゃないですけども、その鶏肉をおろして、備蓄しているものをおろしてくれといった要求を出さなければいけないので、助けてくださいといったケースをですね、我々も対応しまして、実際48時間以内にですね、復旧をし、無事鶏肉を出荷することに成功したようなケースもあるんですけども、やはりですね、ランサムウェアにかかった企業さん、実際国のへのダメージを与えるような影響力のあるような攻撃ではあるので、かなり恐れるべきである攻撃だというふうに我々も考えております。
48時間で対応できたんですね。
そうですね。我々も先ほどラウロが申し上げた通り、3つのハブでですね、メンバーを配置しておりますので、世界どこで攻撃が起きたとしても、オンサイトにですね、人間を送って、実際そこで、迅速に、リカバリーをですね、できるように我々もサービスを目指しております。
なるほど。鶏肉の加工業の企業が被害を受けたときは、結構、いろんな拠点があっていろんなところに人が行ったみたいな感じ。
そうですね。基本的にはその国への影響が一番大きかったので、そこに人員を多く置いてですね、対応しておりました。で、マネジメントチームがですね、別の国にいる場合は、そこにも人間を送ってですね、そこで、実際に経営層の方々たちにですね、攻撃がこういった状況で行われていますので、今こういった対応を行っていますっていう形で、安心していただけるように我々もですね、心理的なサポートですとか、そういったところもですね、やらせていただいております。
はい。ランサムウェア攻撃って言ったときに、攻撃する人、いろんななんとか集団、何々みたいな名前が出たりするんですけど、どういう人が、どういう存在がいて、どういう、手口であることが多いんですか？
そうですね。いわゆる、皆さん、ランサムウェアの、攻撃者っていうのを聞くと、映画のような世界で、地下室で一人、なんていうんですかね、フードをかぶってっていうのをやってるようなイメージをすると思うんですけども、彼らは実はかなりビジネスマインドセットを持っているような集団でして、実際に、人事部ですとか、営業部ですとか、経理部といったような、民間企業が抱えているような部署をですね、しっかり持っており、彼らも売り上げをどれだけ上げられるかっていうのを目標に掲げている団体ではあるので、かなりそういったビジネスマインドセットを持って攻撃などを行っている集団でありますね。
ほとんど会社みたいな存在ってことですか？
おっしゃる通りですね。なので、人員もしっかり、なので、そういったハッカーを、リクルートするための部署があったりですとか、そういった形で、一企業みたいな形でですね、ビジネスを運用している団体です。
そんなでも、会社って言っても公に言える会社じゃないですよね。
いわゆるその裏組織といいますか、そういった攻撃とかを、国として、認めているようなところが、そういったのを構えているので、必然的にロシアですとか中国、そういった国でですね、こういった、攻撃者が、存在するというような形になっております。
で、実際そのハッカーを、抱えてそういう組織でやってるっていう話なんですけど、何をどうやって攻撃の対象を定めたりとか、 どういう手口があるっていう。
そうですね。攻撃者としても、できる限り、その身代金を、支払っていただけるような会社さんを、狙っていますので、
はい、
そこそこの売り上げがあるような会社さんですとか、脆弱性がありそうな企業さんをですね、どんどん当たっていくわけですね。なので彼らも一企業を狙っているわけではなく、もういっぺんに何社もですね、同時並行に攻撃などを行っております。で、手口としましては、これはもういろいろな手口があるんですけども、いわゆるフィッシング E メールですね、詐欺 E メールのようなところから、悪意のあるリンクをクリックしてしまい、そこからマルウェアが、拡散してしまうというような手口もありますし、実際に環境にある脆弱性ですね、例えば古いシステムを使っていってアップデートしていなかったから、そこに穴があってそこから入ってくるというような手口を取ったり しますので、彼らも企業さんもかなりそういったところの防ぐようなツールを入れたりですとか、検知するような対応をしていると思うんですけども、彼らもそういったところを進化し続けてですね、実際に環境に侵害できるような、技術というのをですね、日々進化しながら、攻撃を行っております。
今だと AI を活用して、だからその普通の企業が AI 活用してめちゃくちゃ生産性上げてますとか、自動化してますっていうのと同じように多分そういうことってやっぱあるんです
ね。そうですね。おっしゃる通りですね。やはりその AI の発展によって彼らもそのどういう企業を攻撃したらいいのかというところの洗い出しの部分がかなり効率よくなっていると思うんですね。このぐらいのサイズの企業のこういった脆弱性がありそうな企業を洗い出してくれみたいな形で、AI やチャットボットにですね、投げかければそういうの一覧が出てくるので、そういった企業を片っ端から攻撃していくような、手法を取っているかと思っております。
はい。企業みたいなってるっていうのが、結構この言葉単位で聞いたことがあるんですけど、RAS、ランサムウェアアザーサービス、だからソフトウェアアザーサービスで SaaS っていうのがあるように、そういう企業のことをそういうふうに呼ぶんです
よね。そうですね。やはり裏組織といいますか、そのランサムウェアの攻撃者の、世界にもですね、こういったいろんなレイヤーといいますか、下請け会社ですとか、その大元がいるわけなのですけども、ラースっていうのが、いわゆるそのランサムウェアと、マルウェアを開発する大元の団体のことを言います。それを実際にアフィリエイトといった、下請け会社に、それをですね、販売し、そのアフィリエイトの企業がですね、実際に、攻撃などを行うという形で、ツールをプラットフォームを提供し、攻撃などを行うといったような、手法を彼らは取っております。な
るほど。RAS が、要はソフトウェアの大元の作ってる会社で、そのアフィリエイトって今おっしゃったのは、なんか代理店みたいな感じで販売するように攻撃をするみたいな、
そうですね。
そんなイメージ。
ランサムウェアを売ってですね、で、彼らが攻撃を行うといった形で、いわゆる有名どころのラースで言いますと、ロックビットですとか、ランサムハブですとか、ブラックキャットとかっていったような、ビッグネームの、ランサムウェア、アザサービスの企業といいますか、組織はですね、かなり自分たちのプライドを持ってやっておりますので、あくまでも彼らも犯罪グループでありますので、完全には信頼できないんですけども、かなりプライドを持って彼らの技術をですね、磨いている企業で、組織でありますので、我々も、暗黙の了解ではないんですけども、かなり信頼性の高い、攻撃グループというふうにですね、見受けております。よく、ニュースですとか、で、耳にするようなラースのグループはですね、そういった形で、かなり、自分たちのプライド、そして、ブランドイメージとかを大切にしている組織ではありますので。
ブランドイメージ？
そうですね。なので、後ほどランサムウェアの交渉の部分に入ってくると思うんですけども、ここのどういったランサムウェアの団体と実際に攻撃をされているのかっていうのを理解するのがかなり大事になってきますね。
なるほど。わかりました。というところで交渉の話聞いていきたいんですが、so you've been involved in process of negotiation before?
Right. So Signia basically has negotiators, professional negotiators that do that for a living, that help as part of the process. We see it as one of the instruments of how we do respond to a crisis, leverage negotiations or engagement with a threat actor as a tool to kind of manage the crisis. Right. So it's one of the instruments, and therefore we definitely always recommend to do that, even if you would have a policy, let's say, not to pay. It's not related to the starting point of where you have the idea of engaging with a threat actor, and there's a few reasons for that. If you want me to elaborate, I can get into this. So on the first one, I think it's key to de-escalate the situation. Right?
De-escalate.
There is obviously the ransomware group has invested a lot in their campaign, so to speak, right, in kind of launching that attack, to prepare it, to attack and all of that. So if they see there is no prospect, so to speak, of receiving any kind of monetization of their efforts, they would obviously have potentially an interest to further escalate the situation and put more pressure on the victim company, right? And that could be to encrypt additional types of the parts of the environment or delete the data, for example, that they possess, leak it. And without that, it's definitely important to start building that trust, to start building a conversation with the threat actor in order to calm down the situation and make sure it doesn't get worse, right? So that's the first piece. The second one is usually around buying time and extending the kind of decision-making time that you have, because quite often threat actors are in the pressure business, obviously, and they try to put pressure by saying you have 24, 72 hours to kind of make that payment, and the negotiator can quite often extend that decision-making timeline, and it allows the organization to assess the situation, to understand what basically they possess, what data might be within the hands of the threat actors, and make a decision on whether to make a payment based on that as well. The third piece is quite often to gain additional information, because quite often the threat actor will provide what we call proof of life, certain pieces of information that prove that they have certain things, and that basically allows us also to improve the forensics investigation, to understand, for example, what is the scope of compromise in terms of what they have possessed. What is potentially the initial access vector, right? We kind of learn a lot about the threat actor. Another key thing is the attribution, to understand really who is on the other side of that conversation. What type of group is it? Is it a group that has a brand image to protect, as Soto-san mentioned, or is it more sort of a script kiddie? Is it people that are opportunistically trying to get their luck? And that also has a lot of impact on whether, in the end, if you make a payment, if you decide as a business decision to make that payment, that whether they're going to follow through with their promises or not as well, right? Because if they do have in the dark web, in that community, a certain image to protect, the chances of them following through are a lot higher, basically. Right? And then ultimately, if there is a business decision to move towards a payment, quite often the negotiator can also lower the demand. And the demand is quite often split into different aspects, right? On the one hand, it's the information and the kind of payment to not publish the information. On the other hand, it's the decryptor, right? Because sometimes the threat actor groups decide to do a double extortion, what we call that, which is basically taking data and threatening to publish it. On the other hand, also encrypting parts of the environment, which has an operational impact. That means the organization can't operate in the way they want. And these are two different pain points, so to speak, and two different risks that need to be assessed and implications that need to be understood. And that is a key piece in terms of that. And quite often, the negotiator can break it down into these two elements and reduce the demand for that, basically. Right? So questions like, do you have, for example, a healthy backup that you can leverage, where you want to have your data, you rebuild the environment, you use backups, and you can rebuild without requiring potentially the decryptor. But if that is not the situation, and if you can assess that and see that you have no backups to rely on, then the kind of decryptor might be something that could be more useful and required, basically. Right? And the same goes for the data, where you need to understand what data do they have, and we can do that by analyzing some of the logs, by looking also what the threat actor gives us, and that will allow us to understand what is the risk from a reputational aspect, from a legal, regulatory perspective, and that's very important, obviously.
How do you differentiate the negotiation by the type of groups?
And I think one of the key things, first of all, is to even understand who you're dealing with, right? Because they could claim they are one of the large groups, and then they are a splinter group or someone that's trying to mimic another group. So that's again down to the negotiator to use their skill and use also all the different pieces of information we have from the investigation in understanding whom we're actually dealing with. Does it match the ways they operate, the level of skills they have, the way they conduct the attack with the regular operating procedures on how they would usually operate, right? So that understanding is first very important. And then, of course, again, it really, once you understand who that is, there is on the one hand a brand image, a reputation they would want to protect, and that allows you to understand a little bit the predictability of their actions post-payment, right? It allows you to understand what they will do. The very reputable groups, they would even provide post-payment support. If the decryptor doesn't work, for example, they have a support center, a call center, so to speak, that you can reach out to, and I think that is obviously a part of the decision as well.
What if the attacker is the group that you never encountered before?
So we see that obviously all the time as well, right? Because you have new groups emerging, new type of groups that come up, and then we try to do also threat intelligence. We have our in-house threat intelligence that basically would go into the dark web and see, is there any piece of information out there, anything we can know about that group? But sometimes you cannot know, sometimes you cannot really understand, right? And then I think we rely more on the investigation technical details that we have, right? Because we can see high-end groups operate in a very clear manner. They operate with professional tools. The whole setup is done in a way that kind of makes sense versus more splinter groups or pragmatic or opportunistic type of script kiddie, so to speak, obviously wouldn't have that level of funds to kind of create those complex high-end operations, right? So those indicators help us to understand who we're dealing with and kind of help us to move towards that understanding of what would be potentially the consequences of a payment.
Right. I heard many Japanese companies have a sort of a stance of not negotiating, like not answering to, not responding to the incident. But should companies negotiate in the first place?
Yeah, so we definitely recommend that because it is one of the tools in the way we kind of respond to the crisis, right? And it's very important to say, if you don't do that, there is, again, the risk that this situation could escalate further, right? And there's no reason not to take that risk, right? Or like take that risk, basically, rather say, if you engage with them, you get into control of the situation, right? You have the ability to basically influence the situation, and it doesn't predecess like a decision on whether you make a payment or not, basically, right? It's not influencing that point, because there is obviously ways of phasing out the conversation at the end of it, of making sure you secure the environment should you decide not to pay, so that even if a re-attack potentially might occur, you have fortified your environments and they're able to resist further attacks.
Right. When I look at the recent incidents in Japan, the impact is they ended up being really like long term. Is it related to whether they do the negotiation by themselves, like or not, or they pay to the attackers or not?
Yeah,
what do you think?
Like again, there's two main aspects of usually a ransomware situation. On the one hand, you have the publication of data, which could be any sort of data around PII, trade secrets, and you need to assess that situation on whether you want to kind of let that data go out. But the second one is usually the operational impact, right? Where you have production floors, for example, that cannot operate, which we have seen obviously in cases here in Japan. And that can have quite a substantial impact, obviously. We have seen companies going bankrupt because of that situation as well, right? And their negotiations can obviously have an impact in terms of fastening that process and shortening that process of downtime if you basically move to the situation of getting that decryptor and decrypting the assets and start operating again, basically.
Should victim companies negotiate by themselves, or should they ask the companies that dedicated to cybersecurity, or what should they do?
Yeah, I think it's a very good point, and we very strongly recommend to work with professional negotiators. It's a very risky, very kind of delicate situation, obviously dealing with these threat actors, because they are very professional, right? They do that for their business and do this day in, day out, and people are not used to this, might make mistakes in such situations, right? So a professional negotiator knows how to build up trust with the threat actor. In the end of the day, these are also human beings on the other side, and they are able to build that level of trust that allows them as well, again, to steer the conversation in that direction, whether it's buying time, gaining additional information, or just calming down the situation. And that basically requires a certain skill, right? Requires the ability to read the room, read the situation, and then kind of navigate that conversation. Right.
Who are professional negotiators? Where do they come from? Where do they train?
Yeah, so quite often actually, since this is obviously a relatively new phenomenon, ransomware situations, right? A decade, a bit more than that. It's people that come from traditional hostage-taking negotiation situation, right? Military or police is usually obviously the kind of place where you would find people with that level of experience. And then, of course, they will be trained in cybersecurity to understand the threat landscape, to understand what are the type of groups that we have out there, how do they operate. Also, they need to have some level of technical skills to be able to coordinate and cooperate and collaborate with the technical forensics teams. So that's a critical requirement there as well. But fundamentally, I think the key thing is obviously the personality, the ability to stay calm in that kind of situation, to have a convincing way of operating that kind of allows you to create that basically bond with the threat actor during those negotiations, right? So I think that's the key thing for us.
What are the personality requirements to be negotiating?
Yeah, I think you need to have thick skin, of course, because they see a lot of things. They see a lot of different type of threat actors. Some of them are very friendly in different stages, and some of them less so, right? And it can be quite abrupt, quite aggressive in some of their comments and conversations. And I think it's important to, again, have the ability to stay calm and not to kind of impact your actions through such comments, right?
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Are a lot of them based in Israel or?
So we cannot identify due to the security reasons, obviously, in terms of where they are. But negotiations take place, obviously, in the cyberspace. They do not take place in person, of course, right? So the location is not that relevant in the sense of where they are.
So could you tell us what the real negotiation, what actually happened in the real negotiation? Like, could you tell us examples?
Yeah, so definitely. So basically, usually when there is a ransomware encryption, there is also a note there that kind of identifies the demand and also where to contact them, basically.
Yeah.
Right? And then we basically would engage our negotiator, and the first thing would be to get a clear mandate from the board, usually, or the executive team of the company in terms of what's the main goal of that negotiation. Do we want to buy time in order to assess the situation? Do we want to come to a very fast settlement in order to just get back and bring the business up and running? And that is very important to understand that upfront, right? And once that mandate is clear, the negotiator would reach out to that group, not identifying themselves as a negotiator, of course, right? It would be a person within the company, quite usually a persona that is close to the decision maker, but not the decision maker themselves, right? Because it allows to play with that dilemma, play with the requirement to go and ask the decision maker that can buy time as well. Quite often also taking on some personal aspects and sharing with the threat actor certain elements of saying, for example, a mother that has to take care of their children, and that allows them to get a bit more time and buy further time, right? So it's a very a personal, emotional type of relationship they're trying to build with the threat actor in that situation. And that would happen in sort of chat rooms that are identified, quite often hosted by ransomware gangs, where those conversations are going forth and back. And then the negotiator is also very closely working with the technical teams, because they need to understand what do we know so far from our forensics investigation, how well is the situation contained, how well are the systems secured in case there's obviously retaliation happening. So that's very important, and they basically then would try to achieve that target, right? It can be that a very clear file tree, for example, is provided where we see this is the scope of compromise, and based on that we can assess is that information they possess critical or not. By the way, it's also important there not to make mistakes in the sense of tipping off the threat actor and giving them an understanding of what they have, because we have also seen situations where they've increased the ransom demand once they realize they have very valuable information in their hands. So it's important not to give away anything that is relevant, and then basically move towards that target, right, in terms of what we want to achieve.
Very high pressure.
Yes, it is. It is extremely high pressure. That's for sure. Yes.
All of them, they must be trained properly and very hard.
Yes, and it's important to stay calm, right? And I think again, the threat actors are obviously doing this day in, day out, but also we doing this day in, day out, right? So we bring in our experience that brings that level of calmness, that level of structured response. Because for the victims, obviously, it's an extremely emotional situation. A lot of pressure, a lot of fatigue kicks in as well after 24, 48 hours in a crisis. A lot of stress factors, externally, internally. Usually the media gets involved, the press gets involved, a lot of people ask questions. And then it's very important to have a partner on your side that knows what they're doing and then guiding them through that conversation, through those different decisions that need to be made, and through that understanding of how to best move towards a conclusion in terms of what you want to do.
Yeah. Okay. So besides Japan, what are the countries that are impacted from the cyber attacks right now?
Yeah, so I think it's first of all important to understand there is different type of threat actors, different kind of groups, and ransomware is just one flavor of that, so to speak. You have also state-sponsored actors, for example, that are potentially in there more for espionage, information gathering, or potentially disruption. You have some state-sponsored groups that are focused on actually monetizing their efforts, specifically in North Korea. So those obviously would operate in certain countries. Geopolitically, I think it's logical, obviously, where they would be operating. And then on the other hand, you have ransomware groups, right, which are fundamentally driven from a business concept, from a business perspective, in terms of where they can best monetize. So they would less focus on countries, but rather on targets in terms of companies they would look at. And it's usually, obviously, the top tier companies that are in different countries across Asia, across Europe, across the US and South America. So that is definitely the case. Quite often, obviously, what we've seen is if they can be disruptive in terms of interrupting business processes, it increases the pressure and allows them to be more effective, so to speak. So obviously, anything that is related to critical infrastructure, anything that's related to production, manufacturing, is in that sense easier to kind of interrupt as a business process, right? So Japan has a lot of industrial companies, obviously, and manufacturing companies, and the same in other countries as well, right? In Australia, you have mining, of course. You have different kind of oil and gas across Southeast Asia. So those are quite often targets of those threat actor groups. Right?
I mean, the companies that have risks of like in-person or physical risk, right? The manufacturing and mining. And
we call it OT, operational technology, right? OT. As soon as you have that, it's really the threat to life as well, right? The risk of impacting life, and that obviously increases the stakes significantly. It's not just data, but it's actually people's lives, and that increases the pressure points and the leverage that threat actors have.
Right. Great. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. では、ここで最後のセクションに行きたいんですが、サイバー攻撃は進化するということで、いろんな攻撃のパターン、ランサムウェアに限らず、あると思うんですけど、まず、日本で今後どうなっていくかみたいなところを、青木さんに伺いたいんですけども。
はい。そうですね。グローバルのみならず日本でもですね、サイバー攻撃っていうのが、増えていく傾向にあるかと思います。それもちろん、先ほども申し上げた通り、日本の企業っていうのは、かなり膨大なデータを持っていて、また高い技術を持っているので、攻撃者にとってみれば、攻撃しがいのある市場であるというふうに考えております。で、攻撃の手法の、進化なんですけども、やはりAI のですね、進化によって、我々の、日常もですね、かなり豊かになる中、攻撃者もですね、かなり AI を利用して、攻撃をですね、より高度にしていくというようなことがまず一つ考えられます。でもう一つがですね、やはりランサムウェアに特化しますと、彼らも一番自分たちの売り上げといいますか、利益をどう上げればいいのかというところを一番に考えておりますので、今後ですね、そのランサムウェアを利用せずに実際データだけを引き抜いて、そのデータを公表するか公表しないかの部分で、身代金を要求するといった、実際もうツールを使わないですね、攻撃手法、いわゆるダブルエクソーションでなく、もう本当にシングルエクソーションといったような形で、もうツールを使わない、そこの部分のコストを削減して攻撃を行うというような、手法を取ってくるような傾向も、ここ最近ではよく見受けております。
これだけ日本で大きなインシデントが立て続けに起こって、なんでしょう、サイバー対策みたいなものって、ともすると、いや、めんどくさいじゃんとか、そんなところにお金かけてられないよって、やっぱ被害を受けてみないと、その重要性ってわからないみたいなところって多いと思うんですけど、今の、日本企業でいろいろお付き合いあると思うんですけど、 なんでしょう、温度感って変わってますか？
そうですね。やはりここ数年で、日本企業さんも、こういった日本でも大きなインシデントが起きているので、サイバーといったところに注目はされているかというふうに考えております。でさらに先ほどラウロも申し上げた通り、実際サイバー攻撃を受けてから反応するのではなく、その前の準備をしておくというのが大事であるので、実際にそういったプロフェッショナルと事前に契約をしておくですとか、アセスメントなどを行って、自分たちの環境にどういった穴があるのかっていうのを先に理解する。あるいはこういった2436でモニタリングをしているような、パートナーと提携することによって、早期発見、早期対応が可能にするような、環境を整えていくことが、重要だと考えています。
はい。So, I want to ask you, Lauro, about the global trend in the future that we see a real large scale of attacks. And so, how should we think about the future of cyber attacks?
Yeah, I think one element that will definitely influence the way cyber attacks are being performed and has already influenced is the artificial intelligence, obviously, right? And by the way, on the attack as well as on the defense side, right, it's kind of upping the game on both sides. So on the one hand, you see, of course, like social engineering, for example, being much more enhanced and wide scale and scalable as well, in the sense that it's performed, right? It's a lot easier to gather information on a person. It's a lot easier to create a type of text that you want to send in a phishing email or in a voice call. Deep fake, obviously, is becoming a lot more prominent. We have also like synthetic IDs, for example, that can be created in a way to create fraud cases, right? So there is a lot more happening on that side. So creating, for example, attack payloads, creating the way the actual ransom execution is done. Usually the coding of that is leveraging AI, right? Like in any kind of coding, of course. And I think that is critical. And we've seen even more recently cases where an AI agent actually perform the operations of the entire attack, right? Which is usually always the human at the center and obviously leveraging AI tools. But if the agent does that end-to-end, that obviously increases further the speed, the precision, the efficiency and effectiveness of these attacks. At the same side, obviously, the attacker, the defense side can leverage AI and is leveraging AI in many ways, in identifying threats earlier, faster, basically in empowering the defense teams, the analysts that look at the different alerts that are there in a faster, in a more scalable way, right? Reducing the miss rate, reducing the false positives, and making them more effective, efficient in earlier on and faster detecting and kind of responding to attacks, right? So I think in that sense, the good news is that this is helping the defense side as well, right? But traditionally, obviously, the attacker have the first mover advantage, so to speak, and they're always a little bit ahead, and it's a game to catch up, and it's important to catch up in that sense, obviously, right? So a lot of different companies use AI and ingrain that into the way they build the defense tools, including at Signia, obviously. And I think that's a critical trend that we're going to see more and more.
Are we going to see the future where the AI is attacking the AI, like the cyber attacks between AI sort of thing?
Yeah. In a way, that is kind of to some extent happening already, right? Yeah. I think, of course, as companies use more and more AI at the core of their business operations, not just as a tool to enhance certain things they do, but really how the business end-to-end process is driven by AI. These AI models themselves become a target of the attack, right? And that is something to be aware of and make sure these AI systems are obviously fortified and hardened in the right way so that they cannot easily be attacked. But definitely can be that of course AI focused attacks do basically leverage AI systems and AI tools to perform that, right? So there's definitely that kind of risk.
Yeah, right. Okay. はい、ここまでシグニアのラウロ・バーカータさんと青木壮太さんにランサムウェア攻撃についていろいろ伺ってきました。これからもいろいろなことがインシデント起きるかもしれません。このね、9月、10月と立て続けに起こったわけですけれども、まだまだ氷山の一角ではないでしょうか。はい、本日もご視聴ありがとうございます。ワンオンワンテックでは今後も注目のテックストーリーをお届けしていきます。ぜひチャンネル登録と高評価、そしてクロスディグの公式 X のフォローもお願いいたします。それではラウドさん、青木さん、今日はありがとうございました。Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. ありがとうございます。